Welcome to part 3 of Nigel Farage getting owned. I honestly can't believe it. There's so much material out there. I'm already working on part 4, so here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to Political X. For more knowledge and updates on UK, European and US politics, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Just wanted to say big thank you to my Patreon plural supporters, which has just happened, which is absolutely amazing. And the channel continues to grow. We have just hit 2,500 subscribers to the channel, which is amazing. So let's get straight into it. And this is a debatable one. I thought for me, Tony Blair, ex-Prime Minister, I felt that Tony Blair owned Nigel on this. However, I'm willing to consider that maybe not so much. It'd be interesting to see what other people think on this. I'm not going to go into much more of an introduction with Tony Blair. Obviously controversial because of everything that took place with the Iraq War. Let's just get straight into it.
Prime Minister, 6 months ago you came here, you impressed everybody with your reform agenda, even me. I said if you achieved your goals, I would support you. Economic reform was the cry. And within a couple of weeks, the Commission had proposed to scrap 68 new laws. I thought, crikey, perhaps Blair's going to do it. Perhaps he really is going to reform and change. But no, under your presidency, there have been 3,350 new legislative acts. Total failure on economic reform. On the CAP, you said you'd work to achieve a consensus for reform. Well, in a way you have, I suppose, because you've got 24 countries against you. No CAP reform until 2014. On the budget, you said there'd be no surrender of the UK rebate. Well, it seems to me that you've given away £7 billion of British taxpayers' money for nothing in return. Your only achievement is to open talks with Turkey, which is opposed by the vast majority of people in Europe and will lead to an even higher bill. Why should British taxpayers pay for new sewers in Budapest, for a new underground system in Warsaw, when our own public services are crumbling in London? Why should we pay a penny piece into an organisation whose accounts have not been signed off by the auditors for the last 11 years in a row? This budget deal is game, set and match to President Chirac. No cheese-eating surrender monkey he. Unlike you, he stands up for the French national interest, not some bizarre notion of Europe, and he has outclassed and outplayed you at every turn. Your only real achievement is that Britain is now isolated, alienated. We are completely alone within the European Union, which is why it's been said before. Hang on a second. Everybody else gets an extra minute, Mr. President. I'm asking for 10 seconds. Thank you. Which is why, Prime Minister, I urge you. It's often been said that you wanted to be the permanent President of Europe. Please stay on for a further 6 months, 6 more months of the British presidency, and they'll kick us out. Thank you.
A relatively muted response from the rest of the European Parliament, but what do you expect? He's far right. It's interesting, Tony Blair's just like shaking his head. So let's have a listen.
In my experience in politics, there are 3 groups of people. There's first of all the reactionaries. And let me just tell you, sir, and your colleagues, you sit with our country's flag. You do not represent our country's interests. This is the year 2005. This is the year 2005, not 1945. We're not fighting each other anymore. These are our partners, they're our colleagues, and our future lies in Europe. And when you and your colleagues say, what do we get? in return for what we contribute to enlargement. I tell you what we get. We get a Europe that is unified after years of dictatorship in the East. We get economic development in countries who we have championed. We get a future reform that allows us, once and for all, to put an end to discussion about rebates, common agricultural policy, and get a proper reform budget for Europe. That's what we get if we had the vision to seize that opportunity.
Toasted. Definitely toasted there. Next up is Gibraltar. Now, it's not necessarily the island or colony itself that has an issue. It's actually Nigel bringing up something and not knowing the actual facts behind Gibraltar. In February 2019, Nigel made a tweet that made him look like a fool. He was then eviscerated by people on Twitter. People were certainly quick to hit Nigel with a few hard facts. Important to remember as well that Gibraltar voted 90% to remain. How dare the EU call Gibraltar a colony, yet more arrogant abuse from this awful organisation. You and your Leaver crew are the ones who shafted Gibraltar, who voted over 90% to remain. Pretty interesting. However, we scroll down a little further and we realise it's going to get a lot more awkward for Nigel. A popular fact was that the old blue British passports that people are so keen to get back awkwardly used to call Gibraltar a colony too. Ta-da! It continued because it showed Nigel's complete ignorance of history and geography and the EU, which will come up again later. Colony, a country or area under the full or partial political control of another country and occupied by settlers from that country. There is even a section on Wikipedia that describes the history of Gibraltar, calling Gibraltar a colony. Next up, a Welsh reporter completely and utterly destroys Nigel in Wales, talking about the effects of Brexit on Wales, which is a net benefiter of the EU.
Mr Farage, towns like Merthyr have received millions of pounds of regeneration money. This whole town centre has been funded by EU grant aid. What will Brexit offer them?
Well, I mean, let's be honest about it, it's not EU money. That's one of the great sort of myths and pretensions.
But Wales as a whole is a net beneficiary to the tune of £250 million a year. What will Brexit offer?
We have so far, over the course of the last few decades, given away hundreds of billions.
But not in Wales. Wales has been a net beneficiary, Mr Farage.
Well, the Welsh
address that point, will you?
Well, the Welsh steel industry certainly hasn't been a net beneficiary. Absolutely.
Agriculture, towns like these valleys have been regenerated using EU grant aid. What will Brexit offer?
Well, if you're right about that, why aren't people better off?
But what will Brexit offer? Answer the question.
Well, it'll offer opportunities.
Such as?
Well, for example, the steel industry. We'll be in charge of the
That's
steel
in Port
industry.
Talbot. That's 40 miles away from
That is
Merthyr.
Wales, isn't it?
South Wales, though. Towns like the South Wales valleys.
We got chance for fishing industry.
Fishing industry, huh? The fishing industry. They're going to be a net beneficiary, are they?
And we've got Boris and we've got Brexit done. It's not perfect. You know, the fishermen are angry. Really angry. And if you drove from your constituency an hour and a half, 2 hours southwest to Brixham Market, or I recommend you don't at the moment, they really are jolly angry about it, the way it's worked out.
But also, just you look up and down these high streets. You look at little industries like the business I just popped into. You know, the key thing to remember: only 12% of the entire UK economy is exporting goods to the European market.
Again, complete and utter nonsense. This is from the government, it's from the Commons Library, Parliament. I'll put a link in the description. The EU, taken as a whole, is the UK's largest trading partner. In 2019, UK exports to the EU were 294 billion, 43% of all UK exports. Nigel just said there were 12%. I don't know what planet that man is on, but it's either planet lie or planet deranged. I'm honestly not sure. It's not planet Earth. He is off in the stars. He really is. It's just unbelievable that he managed to get this far in politics and he can just say something like that. And it's also interesting that the reporter doesn't pull him up on it.
And yet, as members of the single market, the other 88%.
But it's higher in Wales. Agriculture, for example, is highly reliant on EU exports. But what will Brexit offer? You're not giving me enough of an answer.
88% of the UK economy is not exports.
We're in Wales, Mr. Farage.
And yet, we're all stuck with single market rules. So I think in terms of small businesses, entrepreneurs, people setting up as sole traders. I think we've got a much better opportunity outside the European Union.
Not only was Nigel destroyed, but we can also see later on, so we move on to 2021 in October, we can see the devastation that Brexit has caused.
So, since the referendum, we've assumed in our forecast that leaving the European Union is going to reduce our long-run potential output by about 4%. And in our most recent forecast, as I mentioned, we think that the effect of the pandemic is going to reduce that potential output by a further 2%. And so far, the data that we've seen on the impact of Brexit, especially taking into account the fact that the new trading arrangements came in January, is broadly consistent with that assumption that we had, which is that it would reduce our long-run GDP by around 4%.
So still, after all this, Brexit is going to have a bigger impact than the pandemic on the long term?
Yeah, in the long term, it is the case that Brexit has a bigger impact than the pandemic over the long term.
Brexit is worse than shutting everyone into their homes for a year. It's double that. That is insane. That is huge damage to the economy. Farage's prediction couldn't have been any further from the truth. Nigel takes on a British caller, but it involves Belgium. Just have a listen to Nigel's view on Belgium.
Belgium is not a nation. It's an artificial creation. I know the Brits did it. Maybe once again we can be blamed.
So a country he's had a run-in with before, but the British caller is going to be speaking to him on a number of topics, and I'm going to help that caller show how badly Nigel doesn't know what he's talking about.
So, is she delivering on the promises made by the government and what people voted for?
I don't think so. I personally think it's a disaster. I don't support this direction of travel at all.
But the country did.
No, they didn't actually.
Really?
Because the way we left was never defined in the vote. And
so, if you have any doubts, essentially Brexit was offered up to the public as if it was some sort of buffet. You could pick and choose. Some could have immigration, some could have access to the single market, some could just completely leave. But essentially, there were 5 different views that I've found offered out to the British public, and Nigel seems to be completely oblivious to this. What a surprise. If you'd like to find out more about these 5 reasons, you can click on the video which is just playing in the background there, and it's called Brain Spotting, and you'll find it on my channel. I'll also put a link in the description. Let's get back to Nigel.
So it included many scenarios that were available. This is just one of them.
Do you not recognise that immigration was the single most important factor in the Brexit vote?
I think you made it a very important factor. I don't think that it was the factor that... I think you exploited people's concerns of people coming here to scrounge, if you like, the people who didn't contribute and took out.
And then Boris Johnson. And then Boris Johnson. Hang on.
Of the 3 million people who were coming into the country as migrant workers, 2.94 million were working and 60,000 weren't. So I think there's a very legitimate concern over people who don't put in and pull out. But there were EU rules in place for those people to be removed from the country.
Phil, don't make me laugh. The idea that Phil, don't make me laugh. Please, honestly, let's grow up with this. It's nonsense. The idea that somebody who'd come here after 3 months hadn't found a regular job, that we were going to put them in handcuffs and send them back through Dover. I mean, it's never ever going to happen. Phil, I also want to make
there were other countries that did apply that, though, weren't there, within the EU?
Who?
Didn't the Hungarians do that? Did the Belgians do that?
I've never seen the Belgians physically deporting anybody to another European country. No.
Well, you may not have seen them. Absolutely. That didn't happen.
Well, I tell you what, I worked there for 21 years, I might know.
I don't know what Nigel was doing when he was out there, but to me it seems like he was sat there taking in the money, being a fat, lazy little man, and I'm about to prove why. Because he said, I was in Brussels, I would have known. Right. Here's a documentary detailing how Belgians are removing people who are EU but aren't working in Belgium.
In the heart of Europe, Belgium's home to more than 1 million immigrants out of a total population of 11 million. Around 70% are from other EU member states with large Italian, Dutch and French communities. In recent years, Belgian immigration policy towards Europeans has tightened, and more people are having their residency permits withdrawn from 8 in 2008 to more than 2,000 in 2014. Between 2008 and last year, more than 10,000 people were ordered to leave Belgium. To Antwerp in Belgium's Flemish north, where Georgia faces an uncertain future. After 28 years of working for an Italian company, this seamstress decided to set up here, with her Belgian partner. Georgia took Dutch classes and worked as a volunteer, but the State Employment Agency can only tell her she was overqualified for anything they could offer her. In November 2013, the city of Antwerp ordered her to leave.
I honestly don't think Nigel did anything whilst he was in the EU. I think he just sat on his fat backside earning money and doing sweet FA. I really do. Like, it's unbelievable. I mean, if this is the thing that would have taken to keep us in the EU, then fair enough. But by God, like, he's just done nothing except moan for 20 years. And quite frankly, I've had enough. I mean, the guy is just full of it.
I've never seen the Belgians physically deporting anybody to another European country. No.
Well, you may not have seen them.
Absolutely.
That didn't happen.
Well, I tell you what, I worked there for 21 years, I might know. Phil, this government was elected with a big majority, making it absolutely clear that freedom of movement would end. I mean, surely they have to deliver on that.
Well, I think you can say you want to control immigration. What I would like to know is who do you think is going to do the work that has now been deemed unskilled and therefore not worthy of people coming into the country for. You know, it's funny, it's not funny actually, it's very serious for me in agriculture that we may no longer be able to access European labour, because what happens when those guys decide that they want to go home for whatever reason, life changes, they move on?
Well, there is
Who
a
is going
special
to replace those people?
There is a special exemption made within the document released today for seasonal agricultural workers. So the government.
No, I'm not talking about seasonal agricultural workers. I'm talking about permanently employed agricultural workers.
Why don't you employ some English people, Phil?
Seasonally, cows get milked all year round.
Why don't you employ some English people, Phil?
Well, the last time we advertised a role for a dairy herdsperson, we had 5 people that we invited to interview, not local people, not one who turned up, not one. People, I'm afraid, have been...
What are you paying them, Phil?
Led down the garden path in terms of expectations, and a lot of people now do not want to do this kind of work.
What are you paying them,
We've lost
Phil?
our rural communities, we've lost our rural schools, because the people who've moved into the barn conversions want to privately educate their kids and take them into the city or whatever.
I think this guy's actually nailed it on the head. I really do. I think this is a problem with the rich getting richer and everyone else being oppressed. That's what I think the problem is. And it's through and through. And Nigel's gone, yeah, it's not the rich. Let's not talk about that. And you'll see he'll completely ignore that point. He'll just focus on immigration. That's his thing. Surprise, surprise, it's not the rich. It's the immigration that's the problem.
We don't have that population. 2/3 of dairy farmers have packed up since I've been a dairy farmer.
Phil, I know that. I know the dairy industry's got massive problems, but that isn't because of lack of labour. What are you advertising these jobs
lack of labour. It's very much driven by lack of labour. We used to bring in Filipino workers under Tier 2 and Tier 4. We can't do that
so
now.
If we open up the doors, if 10 million people come into Britain, you've got lots of cheap labour, that means you'll make a profit, does it?
Hang on a second. Just tell me what you think a herdsperson earns.
I've asked you that twice already.
Because you're being a little bit all-knowing here, because you're making the assumption...
I'm asking you a question.
You're making the assumption that
oh dear. What are you paying?
No, hang on a second, Nigel. You're making the assumption that a herdsperson doesn't earn very much money.
I'd
just like to ask you what you think.
I've no idea what you're paying.
Well,
I'm
exactly,
asking you a question.
So it's kind of insulting that you would think that we are trying to exploit people.
Right.
We're not trying to exploit people.
I'm going to try one more time
people
here.
Just simply are not there.
One more time. I'll try. What are you paying these people?
Okay, so a herdsperson would, working for us, would earn in their pocket in the region of £30,000 a year, and they would get a free house, and they would get free council tax. So a package of about £37,000.
And you're telling me at that level you simply can't find English people that want to do that
I'm telling
job?
you, at that level, we simply can't find people. If you want to talk to labour providers for the dairy industry, I suggest you do that, because...
I don't know what that was, but that was a really dismissive, yeah, no, just move on. Look at that head shake.
So, Phil, you've got no problem.
There's a real problem finding people to do this work.
Phil, you can employ hundreds of people if you're paying that money, thousands of people.
No, you cannot, Nigel. That is not true.
The new point system...
No, Nigel, you're making the assumption that people want to do it. People do not want this kind of work.
You can get your Filipinos back if you want to, because if they've got a skill, they speak English, and you're offering them a job, they're already already got 70 points, and they may even have more. Let's move on.
Before you see our final choice for this week, if you'd like to subscribe and like, please click the button. We're also available on Twitter. If you'd really like to show your support for the channel, we are on Patreon, or if you really fancy just doing a one-off, we are available on Buy Me a Coffee. On a final note, there are a set of Political X films in the Political X playlist, and I am going to plug it because they are worth watching. They go into detail about what took place with COVID, the Taliban and Afghanistan timeline, and a few other topics. Our final video, and it's quite a funny one, so enjoy.
A bit sorry for Boris, Mark, or not?
That's where I've been for the last few years. I've got to say, I'm immensely grateful to you for everything you've done in British politics over the last few years. I used to be an ardent Remainer. I voted Remain. I believed in the European project. Mm-hmm. I believed that staying in the European Union was the best thing for us. And then something happened, and something monumental happened. It completely changed my opinion on the whole situation.
What was that monumental thing, Mark?
I was kicked in the head by a horse.
Right, very good. Okay, fine. Thank you. Mark, we're going to move on from that.
So do you agree? Was Nigel owned in every single one of those videos? If you agree, if you disagree, put your thoughts into the comments below. I hope you enjoyed my political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.